Here we are. Welcome to this. Differently from our habits, we have more people today. Very welcome, everyone. I just explained briefly how is going to be the structure of and the role of each of us this afternoon. First of all, it will be a bit longer than our 1 hour. We will be on live on Zoom and Facebook for 1 hour and a half. We have 5 distinguished speakers as in this English jargon, but you are indeed that I'm going to introduce you in a moment. The objective of this chat conversation, so I encourage all of you to have short statements and interaction as much as possible, will be how to improve the current situation. The talking, are you happy with this, Riccardo? I explain for a moment how is it going to be. I changed my mind. Can you? I would like first to hear a bit your voice. So? Are you there? Yeah, Riccardo.
We're all there.
All there. Not only live, but alive and ready to participate to this chat. Yeah.
Of course we are.
Of course you are. In English, notwithstanding that none of us is English, as usual, we have many different countries represented. Andrus is from Lithuania, is it correct?
That's correct, I'm Lithuanian.
From the European Commission. And Dania from Facebook, you are originally where from?
I am from Poland.
Okay, and we have Juliana, that is German with a very posh surname, von Rupert Bismarck. Correct, yeah. And Ricardo comes from Spain. So
exactly.
That was a difficult question, wasn't it, to answer?
It's okay.
It is. We wanted to have a debate with more people. Meanwhile, I welcome the people and the participants that are quite numerous today on Zoom. We have been quite successful so far with this format of the AVI conversations. I have been given a report. I'm not going to bother you, but we have about 2,000 views on YouTube altogether, 1,000 times Instagram stories, tens of thousands of Facebook and so forth. Our videos, we have been told that they are already used in some trainings for media literacy, of course. So I'm not going to summarize in a very, it would be not respectful from our guest previously. We had 1 hour each discussion, very dense in content, but I just want to mention 2 points. Essentially, there is a consensus that the current situation is not satisfactory. In the sense that people could use their media well, and society can empower them to do so in a better way. Many of our guests have reminded us that there are inequalities from a social economic point of view. The differences in accessing the media themselves is that the quality of information seems to go a bit down. We'll talk about this. Some they are a bit more catastrophistic, is talking about addiction and manipulations of people's mind. Is it true? No. Is overall there is an issue also about the fact that democracy is a bit at stake. Is it true? Some talk about already post-democracy era. Maybe it's too much, but still is clear that another point is that there is a dominant position of some media, concentration of media pluralism is an issue as well that has been repeated over time. The role of technology, artificial intelligence, and is also a worry as well as obviously an opportunity. And our guests were suggesting, I just reminded that we had Sonia Livingstone, Divinia Farao-Meix, Karis Xinari, Christopher Burr, Tapio Varis, Jose Manuel Tornero, Elizabeth Hope, Renate Schroeder, Aura Salla. They all say, okay, we should have more media literacy. Now, is it an alibi? Is it again on the shoulders of the people? We can talk about it a bit. There is an issue about Europe should help us. Is who else if it's not Europe? When I talk about Europe, is European Commission. We can talk with Andrews about it. And a sort of consensus about the need for more regulation and responsibility, and which is the role and responsibility of the main media stakeholders. I make my introduction brief is to then have the proper debate. I say briefly that Riccardo is the Secretary General of the European Federation of Journalists. You are representing through the national organization 320,000 journalists all across Europe. You are a journalist yourself. You are working at Le Soir, and you are very active on issues like hate speech, disinformation, and this also is a point that we have touched upon a lot with our guest. Values is the need of respect, more respect for journalists, more respect for children, more respect for parents, more respect for people that vote a different party from the one that we support. Is the issue of polarization, bubbles, echo chamber came a lot. Juliana will help us in maybe talk about some of these issues, especially journalism. You are the founder of Lie Detectors. That is an organization that is working a lot of disinformation and media literacy. You are yourself part of the media literacy expert group of the European Commission, and you have been part, together with Riccardo, I think, of the high-level group of disinformation that the Commission set up. Is a lie detector is young, but you have already received quite some award for your role in education, correct? You have also worked in journalism for a number of magazines and Reuters, is the Spiegel. You are German. We have said it already. I briefly introduce also Anya and Andrews, and then I give you the floor. Riccardo. Anya is a lawyer. You are working on for Facebook on content and regulation. You are quite an expert on the Audiovisual Media Service Directive and copyright. You have been at Facebook for 4 or 5 years now. And I mean, from my notes, you have graduated in Oxford and you have studied in Amsterdam, and you have quite an experience on European affairs because you have been involved with the European Parliament amongst other organizations. Audrius Perkushkas is, yesterday we were talking with Audrius, is my pronunciation of your Perkushkas correct?
It goes in the right direction. In Lithuanian language, you typically pronounce au always, letters which go together, like au gives au. So Perkauskas.
Perkauskas. Okay, but it's you definitely is then that is the deputy head of the European Commission Audiovisual and Media Services Policy, within the DG Connect. You have worked quite a long time now. I mean, long time is a relative concept, but 15 years for some people are long time to have worked in Brussels, and for the European Commission, and you were indeed advising also your own government and before joining the European Commission. I am Dana. So maybe people want to hear more voices and not just mine. So the floor is yours, Ricardo.
Thank you, Paolo, for this introduction. Thank you for introducing the speakers, including me. As you said, I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist representative as well, person. I would like to tell you in a few words why we as journalists we consider media literacy to be fundamental. I'm not going to dwell on issues like the mistrust of the media or the proliferation of disinformation at a time when we most need reliable, credible, and verified information. I'm used to saying that the best antidote to disinformation is certainly not anti-fake news laws, as has been adopted in some European countries like Hungary, Romania, but France is also thinking about it. We believe as journalists that the real antidote to disinformation is a comprehensive policy, including increased transparency from those in power. And this is never mentioned by those in power. But what we need first is more transparency.
In our terms from media literacy perspective, we say that the best antidote to disinformation is smarter citizen.
Exactly. We need also increased responsibility from the platforms, the digital platforms, and we'll discuss this with Anya indeed. We need, of course, quality journalism. We need ethical journalism. And of course, media literacy, which is the subject of this webinar. So to summarize it, journalists see themselves, I would say, as allies of media literacy initiatives. Media literacy is, I would say, like in fashion. In a newsroom, my fellow journalists would say that media literacy has become a sexy subject. Okay, so I think we should go now for the first set of opening statements from our speakers. And I think we'll start with Juliana. Let's start with you. Please tell us, as Paolo said, in maximum 3 to 5 minutes, what your organization, Lie Detectors, is doing in this field.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Paolo. It's very nice to see the fellow panelists. Thanks for convening this really interesting panel and also for placing such an important accent on this issue, which is close to all of our hearts, I think. So as Paolo said, Lie Detectors is an independent and luckily award-winning media literacy organization that works with 200 plus professional journalists across Europe to empower young people and their teachers to distinguish between what's true, what's false, and what lies in the middle. One very important point is we are non-political and we take no money from any political or commercial entities, not any money from the platforms. And we also advise governments and policymakers. So as a part of the high-level expert group, the media literacy expert group. And we also work quite a lot on, advancing the idea of limiting disinformation also from a supply perspective. So we work to tackle disinformation from a demand perspective, that is to create resilience, media literacy, etc., but also from a supply perspective, and that is very much about limiting the drivers of disinformation. And like you, we've been worried about disinformation for a long time. What we see, I want to say something briefly about COVID. What we see in this pandemic environment is a perfect example of what can happen when false information travels at breakneck speed, undermining, without even any obvious political slant, left or right, travels unchecked around the world, undermining trust in fact, undermining trust in science, undermining the ability of regular citizens to make informed decisions, and with that undermining the democratic process, which relies fundamentally on the ability of citizens to make informed decisions. So I'm sure we'll talk about regulation, given the presence of the Commission and Facebook on this panel, and Ricardo from the journalism sector, and certainly it's time to grasp the nettle and talk about that. Perhaps we'll talk about the European Democracy Action Plan later, but it's also time to make this resilience, as Ricardo was saying, one of the fundamental ways of tackling disinformation. And when we're talking to children these days about disinformation, here are the questions that they line up in this digital environment to ask screen to screen, to ask our journalists when they appear by video conferencing in the classrooms. They say, is it true that, the coronavirus was made on purpose? What should I do if my aunt tells me that Bill Gates is trying to poison all of us? Is washing our hands actually really dangerous? And so, these are actually practical things that they're really concerned about. And it really reinforces our commitment to creating resilience to disinformation. We do that by sending journalists from all sorts of media organizations into classrooms to talk about disinformation, why it exists, what it is, actually to ask the children what they would call it, how it is relevant to them, but also to talk about how journalism works, because what we really want to highlight is the difference between purposeful disinformation on the one hand and journalism on the other, which might not always be perfect, but that actually has the good faith intent to inform. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about how it looks at the moment when we go into classrooms. I'm just going to share my screen very briefly. I've been warned not to do death by PowerPoint, and I promise I won't do it. Okay, tell me if you can see this. Yeah,
it works.
Okay, so excellent. I'm going to play the slide, and I hope very much that this is going to work out. Okay, great. So basically, these days, we can no longer walk into a classroom, obviously. And what we're finding is that, first of all, we were very interested, do the teachers even have the bandwidth to deal with us, to integrate us into their teaching day? Because really, as the OECD has said, this current moment is when education is undergoing its biggest disruption in history, in its history. Teachers are dropping out. Children are disappearing from the educational map during lockdown. Teachers are having breakdowns. This is a real moment of crisis, and nonetheless, they invite us into their classroom in all sorts of different formats. So you can see, sometimes the classrooms are there. Sometimes, as you can see, perhaps in the middle, the central top center picture, sometimes we have to go in by Zoom and we only see the little black checker boxes. What we really wanted to know was, what is the impact right now? And what we see is that because we're working with teachers, children, and their parents during lockdown, we can get a really good picture. And we're seeing something which says, yes, it's a moment of crisis, but it's also a moment of unbelievably strong interest. This is relevant when before, as Ricardo was saying, it's becoming sexy, it's also becoming highly relevant. If before children might have thought, young people, some people who maybe not that plugged into the political process might have thought, oh, disinformation, that's about politics. That's nothing to do with me. It doesn't concern me. All of a sudden, knowing the difference between a fact and a fiction is bitterly important to everybody. Here's another one. This is from a teacher. So we were really heartened. What the children told us that they wanted to talk to us about, and we can talk about all of it. Maybe I really hope we'll get to talk about conspiracy theories later on. They worry about chain letters. They're really deeply interested and involved. And one of the things that we asked them is where they go to inform themselves. And what we find is supremely interesting. And it is this. Here's where they are. They're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. What do these things have in common? They have in common that they're actually not at all where adults inform themselves, right? Adults might be on WhatsApp, but if you look a little bit further down and look for Facebook and look for Twitter, they are absolutely in the minority. Children are not informing themselves on Facebook or on Twitter, which is where a lot of our political accent is currently being placed when we are talking about the European Democracy Action Plan, or the Digital Services Act, or the Code of Practice, or the very, very many things that are currently being discussed. What these things have in common also is not just that the children are navigating an entirely different universe, information universe, than the adults, is also that this is very visual, as you can see. Or the textual, the most popular news source for them is one that is entirely encrypted. And that is significant because it means that children are not only informing themselves in very different ways, away from the parents, away from the teachers, but that they also are navigating in an encrypted universe, and they are also navigating in a visual universe. And both of those are very hard to fact check and to moderate, which brings us back to the reason why, and here's the difference between adults and children. And with that, I'm going to unshare my screen because I think it's quite enough. I said I would do 2 or 3 slides. I think that was more like 6 or 7. I'm sorry about that. But I think it's really important to make this point that it is such a different universe. It is so fast changing. And while the difference, this digital gap between teachers or adults and children can act as a real chilling factor on adults being willing to discuss with young people disinformation, because they're not on Snapchat and they're not on TikTok and they're not on Twitch, and they might be afraid to talk about these things. They might be afraid of the polarizing content that they might encounter there, etc. Nonetheless, what we're seeing at the moment is a very, very high level of interest, a very, very high level of momentum among the teachers who are climbing a very, very steep learning curve, a real appetite for media literacy, and a moment that we really have to grasp without wasting too much time, because things are advancing, and we need to do, conspiracy theories are creeping into the classrooms of 10-year-olds, and therefore we must act fast and we must act decisively. I'm really happy that we're going to be talking about solutions today. I'd really like to hear what you all have to say. I have a few in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. I think it was important to point out these 2 universes, the one from the children and the one from the adults. Audrius, Juliana and my colleague Renate Schröder, as reminded Paolo, have been involved in the media literacy expert group launched by your organization, DG Connect. And one gets the impression that media literacy has become a priority topic for the European Commission. Can you tell us where we stand?
Thank you, Ricardo, and many thanks to Paolo for inviting me to join indeed this panel today. So, talking about media literacy, I think one of the first very good signs for media literacy was when its role was formally recognized in Audiovisual Media Services Directive, because Audiovisual Media Services Directive, so the rule book for media in Europe, it was updated just recently in 2019, and now member states are implementing those rules. And there, let's say, there are three important points. So first of all, member states are obliged to take measures to promote media literacy. Then video sharing platforms such as YouTube or Facebook, they are also under obligation to take some media literacy measures. And the Commission will be keeping a close eye on what is happening, what kind of improvements are put in place, because member states will have to periodically report to the Commission on what concrete measures actually they have taken. And let's say to expand a bit on where media literacy stands in the overall scheme of things. So as Julian was just demonstrating, media environment is evolving very fast. So in a way, there is a limit to what we can do with rules targeting supply side. So rules regulating content, because of course, some things are obvious, like saying that certain content or certain behavior is illegal because, of course, I don't know, like terrorist content or child pornography, it can be disturbing and lead to psychological or even physical damage. So the society has a huge interest to very clearly say it's illegal and to promote effective measures to remove such content. But then there is lots of content which might be, I don't know, controversial or harmful, but not outright illegal. And it's much more difficult actually to invent rules and regulatory schemes for this type of content. You have seen what was going on recently with disinformation. So Europe was, we could say, experimenting with self-regulation and the code of practice on disinformation, and with some inbuilt reporting mechanisms. And there is a question mark whether that's effective enough or sufficient. But at the same time, there is a recognition that you can go further, but you then face other considerations and dilemmas, like how to reconcile your strong action, for example, with freedom of expression and then freedom of press. So this is why it's not that obvious. And even if the Commission is likely to propose further initiatives in this field in the forthcoming Media Action Plan, Democracy Action Plan, and Digital Services Act, I think this demand side or user side with media literacy will remain hugely important, because regulation will always have its limits. It will not reach every corner of internet. So it's important that our educational systems and non-governmental organizations, they play their role in strengthening critical or maintaining or strengthening critical thinking and technological skills, so that both young people and older generations were able to navigate well this online space, which are rich of both positive and negative information, and make let's say, right choices. First of all, understand what is on the screen, and know how to intelligently interact with what is on the screen. So this is my brief introduction.
Thank you, Audrius. So we know now that media literacy is not only a sexy issue, it's also an obligation for member states. They have to implement media literacy measures, concrete measures. Anya, I would say that, and maybe it's the same question, media literacy was not initially, I would say, part of the core business of social media platforms. Anyway, two years ago, Facebook launched the Digital Literacy Library to help young people use the internet in a responsible way, I would say. Can you tell us more on Facebook initiatives?
Yeah, and very happy also to at some point address lots of interesting points made by my fellow panelists, because a lot of important things have been already shared. So before I just dig into specific projects, I just wanted to maybe bring a broader picture of Facebook approach to it. I mean, Facebook is a private company. It's not an educator. It's not a fact checker. It's not a publisher. So what role can Facebook play and support the efforts made by the governments, various agencies, and also important civil society and education stakeholders? I mean, obviously Facebook is, as we know, in many of those discussions in the front row, voluntarily, involuntarily, whether it's discussion around elections, whether it's discussion to which Juliana was alluding around COVID, what's true, what's not true. It's a new kind of phenomena in terms of diseases and the information coming from that space. So basically, Facebook is this place where those discussions take place. And of course, as we could see, young people sometimes venture to some other mediums, but generally speaking, lots of those discussions we see happening on Facebook, and we're here to give everyone a voice. However, of course, this is with some limitations around, you know, what of course is already in the Commission's mind around illegal type of content that's being taken down, but also we have various policy tools around harmful content and around content that is also, you know, disinformation, misinformation, which we also wanted to later discuss the difference between the two. But also the other part of that that picture is exactly what we trying to contribute in order to build a safe and kind of healthy digital community around Facebook, but also broadly speaking on internet. And here, basically, we can only be a partner to many of you that work on those issues, including EAVI, of course, but including many others, where we basically try to see how we can support, first of all, of course, financial support, but also how we can support with building coalitions, with building partnerships, with fostering research initiatives in that space. So that was, broadly speaking, our approach to it. Responsibility that we took very seriously on what's happening on our platform, where we act upon misinformation, where we engage a network of fact checkers who work separately from Facebook, and yet they flag content on Facebook, letting our community be better informed. Still, this content exists and still is available. However, the community is then aware this is content that was fact-checked and is not proven sufficiently sustained with any information. Around COVID specifically, because it was leading to real world harm, we decided that some of those misinformation were actually taken down. So information that one should, I don't know, drink bleach, or one should do some various questionable techniques that have nothing to do with what WHO and other national health authorities were recommending, was taken down just because people were in this kind of state of mind that they were in fact trying to test those. So this is what we're trying to build. So on us, and then with the partners, and with the partners, it's really taking the also the second row, so to say. We are not always the experts. We're not always, you know, the best informed. What's, for example, how to best build a school curriculum, or how to approach students about those issues. But we can definitely bring real life examples. And therefore, we had a variety of media literacy initiatives, including the Digital Literacy Library, which I'm happy to say is being used by various educational organizations. And we're going to do so much more, because it is, as you said, not only a sexy topic, but it is really the key to unlocking this challenge, which is we can't really regulate, you know, fake news phenomena, but we can help our communities being, you know, immune, so to say, to receiving such information, to being able to distinguish, you know, is this someone's opinion? Is this a journalist blog, or is this you know, is this a research piece, or is this someone's opinion that just clicks well? So, you know, just being aware of those things will really help us going forward. I will stop here, and I just really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Anya. Juliana, and maybe Paolo as well. I would like to come back to you as, I would say, ground actors. I would like you to react to you know, the EU initiatives, public initiatives at European level, and private initiatives, you know, from Facebook. Do you think it's enough? Should they do more, or should they act differently? From your experience, I would say, what is your how do you see it from your point of view, Juliana, and maybe Paolo as well?
Sure, that's a huge question. So, I mean,
you can make it short.
Yes, I will. I'll try and keep it really succinct. What Adria said about regulation not reaching every corner, that is true. Nonetheless, we should absolutely not throw our hands in the air and just let it all go. The European Commission has got extremely valuable tools at its disposal. You know, when it comes to regulating fake news, of course we should definitely not be regulating fake news. You know, the world, you know, not the entire world is such a cozy democracy as, you know, as Europe is, and the world, you know, the world is watching. If we start regulating fake news and saying what's fake and what's not, then, you know, other parts of the world are going to be in real trouble, and our fellow journalists in other parts of the world are going to be in real trouble, and we hear that from them regularly. However, you can absolutely take a close look at the drivers of information. We can, of course, use the European Democracy Action Plan, the Digital Services Act, to consider limits on targeted advertising, which is the extraction and harvesting of hyper-personal data and its marketing for, you know, in a sense, in a way that creates very great silos and unbreakable silos. You know, there's a wonderful Dutch comedian who recently said it's like, you know, the micro-targeting creates a universe where, you know, Paolo might be walking into a supermarket where the aisles are filled with beautiful organic produce, you know, whereas when I go into the same supermarket, it is magically filled only with junk food because that's what I love, you know. So creating these different universes might be good for the advertising revenue business model of the large platforms, but it certainly exacerbates the existing polarities that we're seeing and that are undermining our democratic process. So, you know, let's consider limits to the advertising revenue, the targeted advertising. Let's consider, you know, whether it isn't time to start looking and deploying very targeted antitrust tools. You know, the European Commission is very, very fortunate to have these very sophisticated tools at its disposal, which it can, to test the relationship between the advertising revenue business model of the platforms and the dissemination of disinformation. Let's also start thinking of, is there a time when a platform becomes so big that it becomes a natural monopoly and should be regulated as such? These are all important things to take into account. At the same time, yes, of course, and this is why we work on resilience. We can't wait. Now is the time. When I think about the platforms becoming involved in education, I have to say that our teachers want to know, and they ask us, where's your money coming from? The credibility of what we do rests very much on the fact that we do not take money from politics, and we do not take money from commercial interest. And so, of course, money is needed. You know, that is absolutely correct. And of course, the platforms have got a lot of money. And of course, a GAFA tax is a long, long way away. But in the meantime, why not create a blind trust? Why not create a foundation? Why not do something, create a financing vehicle, as the high-level expert group recommended back in 2018, that will sever the direct link between the very powerful, let's not, you know, Anya, let's not, you know, you're representing an extremely powerful company, to sever that link and sever any perceived or real influence buying. And I think that's going to be extremely important going forward as we start thinking about how we're going to pay for this. Because if media literacy becomes that sexy and it needs to be done, there's going to be money needed. Let's be really careful where we're taking the money from, so we're not actually stopping ourselves from being able to regulate in other parts. And finally, the final thing I'm going to say, and this is something that I think is really important, I'd love to talk more about it, we need to create the kind of incentive for politicians so that they invest their political dollar in this in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Paolo, do you share the same concerns?
Well, I would start to congratulate ourselves, actually, because it's to get to this point that media literacy is sexy. I've been part of this expert group of the European Commission since 2006, and it took a long time. I remember that in the first draft of the European Audiovisual Media Service Directive, media literacy disappeared. And then it's thank, and we should really thank the people, the pioneer, some of the experts that we have already conversed with the AVI conversation, but also others that have pushed in this direction where we are now. Now we have to be a bit careful. I think there is a risk that the concept of media literacy is the one that it was developed in a first instance. Now it's much broader. We should talk not just about rational logic, critical skills, but also things that relate more to emotion, the attention economy, is awareness, and so forth. So the concept of media literacy is evolving as well. But it's indeed great that now it is also within is a piece of legislation like the directive, but also part of it is also another piece of legislation that the European Commission is studying, is the Democracy Action Plan, the Digital Service Act, and so forth. Very briefly, is so many issues would deserve to be talked about. I would underline one point that is somehow to validate the assumption that we are working towards the same objective with different roles and responsibilities, as he has been highlighted, but the media industry is somehow can do something for the common good. Is it true? Is not? Are the interests of Facebook compatible with the interest of citizens? This is something that I think I would like very much strategically to consider Facebook and social media, not only social media, because search engines as well, to be an ally rather than an enemy to fight. Because we have to be pragmatic, but also to reach an impact. Indeed, this starts from the acknowledgement that I think we are getting there from companies like Facebook that they can contribute to the solution somehow. Evidently, maybe Anya can add to this or agree or disagree. A very minor point, super short, is that Juliana, you mentioned about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and freedom of press. It is very rarely reminded that declaration, that article of freedom of press, state the right of people to receive information, as well as to speak out and be free. There is a universal right for people to receive information. I think this we should discuss more in the debate, because maybe we have already that right, that is, and obviously it should be updated with the current technology and the state of affairs. I stop here.
Right, Paolo. Indeed, the right to access information is included in Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Anya, Juliana mentioned the need maybe to take measures on targeted
Sorry,
advertisement.
Ricardo, can I just
Yes.
say, because I forgot to say that the people can ask questions in the chat box or in the question and answer or
Indeed.
on Facebook, and we will. Carry on.
We already have one question indeed, but before going to the questions from the audience, I would like Anya to react on what Juliana said regarding maybe the need to take some measures to regulate. A few days ago, an international group, the Forum on Information and Democracy, issued a report proposing new models of public regulation and co-regulation. This group believes that platforms, including Facebook, should assume the same kind of obligation in terms of pluralism, for example, that broadcasters have. What do you think about this, Anya? Is it compatible with the need for a company like Facebook, you know, to do its business? Its business to, yeah. Is it something you take into consideration, the concerns from civil society organization and media actors, because it comes as well from the media sector? So the need to implement a kind of co-regulation or public regulation of social media. What do you think about this?
Thank you, Ricardo, and many questions, in fact, because I think Juliana was talking about something else, and you as well about an additional issue related to it. So I will try to address both without maybe taking too much time, because this is, of course, can continue, I think, for a separate panel almost. I mean, look, as I said in my initial introduction, Facebook doesn't have the tool to solve the issue of somehow lack of sufficient media literacy, especially among young people. We take guidance from partners and from research partners that we work with. We absolutely do not want to dictate anything. We just provide the tools such as digital library and work sometimes together on some more immersive curriculums. But here we always, you know, as I said, assume a second row and let the expert and regulators you know, give us guidance, what's really expected, what's really needed. So, you know, your feedback, for example, is something that we're really seeking on. As to advertising model, I just want to clarify one thing that I think was mentioned. Our advertising model and most, you know, industries that use that model, which are, for example, publishers, large publishers, are really relying on advertising model. None of those industries is taking and harvesting anyone's personal data. That's in fact a big misconception that I think was somehow perpetuated, and I just want to make sure that we have it clear. We just basically work with advertisers to understand which groups they want to reach. All the work is done through the aggregated type of data. There's no personal data involved in any way, and that, of course, is because that would be really bad for all our users, but also it would be strictly speaking against the law, and especially GDPR. On the publisher side, I mean, I know those discussions quite well as well, and I participated in some of them, and I think it's a very interesting concept, and it might look right on its premises that, oh, Facebook, some people come to look there for news or news-related content, publishers do news, broadcasters do news, so let's just, like, you know, throw Facebook into the broadcaster or publisher pot. I think it's a couple of problems there with that approach. Facebook is not a publisher. So Facebook is not a publisher from the perspective of an editor-in-chief a person who sits and chooses the first page, the last page, the middle page, tells the journalist to work for next month on certain piece of content versus another one, and therefore receives a product for which he is fully responsible for, and he signs off on that product. There is no journalist who just throws the product in the middle without the knowledge of editor-in-chief. There are different types of products, of course, like Netflix, where basically the product is building some kind of understanding of people's preferences, and perhaps I will have a different product or different, let's say, first top choices than Juliana or you, Ricardo, because probably we might enjoy different type of content, yet the product will all be the licensed content. There won't be any kind of YouTube video or any kind of Facebook video that appears there, user generated. And I think that's the main difference here. We have mainly user generated content on our platform. And therefore, being an editor of something like this would ultimately put us in a role of some form of a censor. We want people to use the platform freely, to exchange ideas, talk about things, sometimes have discussions about things, post funny videos, obviously within the limits of the law being prohibition, of course, of content that is illegal. So any type of terrorist content, any type of CI kind of content, any type of content that incites to violence. We also have specific rules that go a little bit beyond that. We don't want to see harmful content on the platform either. So content that's not per se illegal, but still is harmful. And I think AVMS law that the Commission was working on and now is in the process of implementation is a very interesting legislation in that space, that it tries to kind of balance and offer solution to platforms that want to take this responsible approach towards the platform. So what I'm saying is that, no, we're not a publisher, we're not an editor. The broadcasting code wouldn't make sense to Facebook. Well, that's why we have the discussion about DSA. That's why we have a discussion about EDAP. That's where the rules will come into play. And we as a company, we're very open to have those discussions. We do consider that we have a very big responsibility in this space. We have 2 billion users interacting with content every day. And we do want to have opportunity to do more in the space of tackling proactively illegal content, in the space to being fully transparent about, for example, political advertising when it comes to EDAP. So those issues, I think, and I hope will be addressed in very soon, in 9th of December, as I hear, or 2nd of December for EDAP. And we definitely stand ready and wanna hear how this will come about for benefit of our users, basically, ultimately.
Thank you, Anya. We already have 2 questions directed to you on the chat. I will come later to these questions to balance the interventions. We have one question for Juliana as well, but I would like to give the floor first to Audrius, because we know that the European budget for the coming years will devote much more financial resources to media and media literacy. Audrius, does this mean that there will be more EU projects focused on media literacy specifically? Are you already working on this maybe new pilot projects? I don't know. How are you dealing with the fact that there will be indeed more resources devoted to media literacy?
Thank you, Ricardo. So we can only welcome the fact that there will be more money for media literacy. And indeed, we especially welcome the recent progress in the negotiations of the next budget of the European Union, where the Council and the Parliament agreed and found a compromise, which includes even more money for Creative Europe, and more money for Creative Europe means also a bit more money for projects in the field of media freedom, pluralism, and media literacy. And we were already financing a series of media literacy projects under the brand Media Literacy for All, This was indeed done, as you say, on ad hoc budgetary allocation, on the basis of ad hoc budgetary allocations from the European Parliament. And with Creative Europe, let's say, almost agreed as part of EU budget. This gives a perspective for media literacy projects to be continued, but also for more media literacy projects to be launched, because this so-called cross-sectoral trend in the Creative Europe program, it will provide a stable financial basis for this kind of media literacy projects. So each year will be a working program for Creative Europe specifying in which direction the Commission expects financing to go. And I can assure you that media literacy will always be there.
Excellent news. Question to you, Juliana, from Vivian. Thanks, Juliana, first for your testimonial, direct and precise. And Vivian would like to know what are the main changes you could notice talking about news consumption after the children finish the media literacy courses.
That is a very interesting question. And it goes to the heart of what I was saying earlier, that we need to create measurable numbers so that we can say that after such and such media literacy training, the effect is like this. And only that way can we actually expect that there'll be a long-term sustained, not only financial investment, but also political investment in this. So what we ask is, we currently work with worksheets. We get the kids to, gosh, I wish I had some with me right now. So they get the worksheets before we go and visit, and they work with things that we know from them that they normally get. So it's a WhatsApp chain letter, it's a TikTok viral video, it is a YouTube, whatever, it's an Instagram photo. And we give them questions, and we give them very simple tools with which to work, extremely simple tools. They're the tools of a journalist, but actually we've got them from IFLA, the International Federation of Librarians Associations, which made a beautiful little checklist. Check, read more than just the headline, check the date, who is the author, what do you believe this because you want to believe it, confirmation bias, all of those, they can be very simple and they can be very deep. And once the children and children and adolescents, right, we're working with young people aged 10 to 15, once they've worked with this and then they meet a journalist, they go into deeper contact with them. What we're asking them is, which tools were you unaware of? What kind of fact checking? Do you do this kind of fact checking at school? Have you ever been asked to do this kind of fact checking at school? Is this the same as other stuff that you do at school? And what we find again and again is that the children say, we love this. I love the reverse image search. I didn't know that actually it really makes sense to click around and look at some other things. Oh, I didn't know that Instagram is not a news source. I always thought that it was a news source. Well, okay, now I understand that there's journalism that you have to check what the author is, where it's coming from, etc. Think about if something is sourced, if something is accredited to somebody, the kind of things that can create trust, some kind of trust indicators about whether a piece has been solidly reported or not. And the fact that they didn't know that before, that they are surprised by it, that they say to us, often we ask an open question, which is, what surprised you most about this? And they will say that it's so easy to put disinformation online, and that it's so easy to unravel it. And I think that is really one of the most fundamental things that we've got to get across. While we've got this momentum going, before the pandemic, and I will never say that the pandemic was a good thing, obviously not, right? But the momentum, the extra interest that has been created by this health crisis cannot be underestimated. Before, we often found young people perhaps going, well, disinformation, I don't know what to do about it. It's all too different. Nothing's true anyway. I won't believe anything, right? And that kind of fake fatigue is really dangerous. The fact that they are excited, the fact that they like using the tools, the fact that they didn't use the tools, but after very short exposure to the tools are ready to keep using them and that they make sense to them. And especially also that the teachers, for instance, will keep using them, that not not that I've been in a classroom recently, but I have been in classrooms where the teachers have taken the toolbox and stuck it on a wall. These are all really good indications that good stuff is happening. Look, we're only ever in a classroom and we give them the worksheets. We have to see how they work with them. We ask them how they work with them. We then go and visit them for 90 minutes. 90 minutes is not long enough to change the world. That is an impulse session, right? But if we can put the question marks into the heads of the kids and the teachers, then we're really getting somewhere. And we've got every indication that is happening. But any other, we're talking to academics about, what we should measure, what kind of words we should use so that the data that we are getting is pulling in the same direction as, for instance, the OECD, which is readying a report on multi-source literacy to think about exactly that. Is critical media literacy something that should be recognized finally as a core literacy alongside reading and writing and counting? And so it's very, very important to ask exactly that. What are we achieving? Yeah. Are we measuring it in the same way? Can we make that case to the people who matter?
Yeah. The point is to empower the children, and you are creating a new generation of journalists. Would
yes.
say.
In fact, if I may say something very brief, the architect of the PISA rankings at the OECD, Andreas Schleicher, recently wrote something extremely interesting. He said, the 21st century learning is no longer about the vertical transmission of facts from the older generation to the younger generation. It is instead about the process of triangulating sources, assessing the quality of information, and from there building knowledge. And that, as you know, is the work of a journalist. So really, the OECD is saying we all need to be miniature journalists. Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. We have a question on exactly the same issue, but directed to Anya. A question from Ali Reza.
Riccardo, can I, because I would also like to have your opinion, and I would like to involve you a bit in the discussion, if I may, and then we get back to the questions. Because you have you are representing this organization, and you have the sense and the pulse of what is happening to journalism, as Juliana has mentioned, is across Europe, to say the least. And we have talked about local journalism and in different regions with Renate already. I think one of the points that has been mentioned and that we should take into account is that we should think about rules, regulations, acknowledging that it is not about traditional media that we have in mind, that we should deal with. It's a different environment. It's a different kind of advertisement. It's a different kind of, all of the main variables, or some of them have changed. No? There are worries, preoccupation, democracy, journalists, and you are key journalists in this process of putting forward or defending democracy somehow. My question to you is, why should we trust journalists? In a way we must, because it's the best alternative at our disposal. But how can we know whether you are authoritative, whether the is within these business models that you are struggling with?
For sure, but I think the real challenge for journalists today is to reconnect. It's not a question of business model, in my point of view. The real challenge for us as journalists is to reconnect with our core values, to serve the public interest. We've been facing many problems, unemployment, the financial crisis in the sector. But from my point of view, it's more important than ever to focus on our core mission, which is to act on behalf of civil society, to be the voice of citizens, And that's why it's so important for us to strengthen, you may know that the European Federation of Journalists is focusing on ethical journalism, ethical rules. The best way to regain trust from the citizens is to act in a very ethical way, and we should improve. So we should be the first to denounce our own mistakes, as journalists, and maybe I believe we are not enough transparent on the way we work. We do not consider the audience. We speak from our throne. That's not the way we should act. So I expect a change of attitude, I would say, from the profession, and it's happening. Many journalists, young journalists, I teach journalism at the ULB, University of Brussels, and I really feel that the new generation of journalists is really empowered by these core values. And I strongly believe that our core values, and most of all, of course, to seek the truth, the respect the truth, and the public interest, the fact that we should work for the interest of citizens and not the interest of the media owner or that politician or that person in power position. So I'm rather confident. I'm rather optimistic. I see a change within the profession.
Thank you. I was mentioning maybe at the very beginning that some of our guests in the previous weeks they are not so optimistic talking about the different scenarios that are likely or possible to happen, not just talking about...
I think Juliana wants to react on this, yeah.
I would love to say something about that. And I think that's wonderful to hear that there is a sense of optimism in the journalism industry. I also think that it's really important that people should understand how journalism works, because these days, anybody can be a journalist, anybody can create a blog post, anybody, let's just look at how many people are putting up TikTok videos, right this very second, right? People have, bloggers, video journalists, whatever you call it. And while everybody consumes information and can put it online, very few people actually understand what journalism is. We went into a classroom in Vienna recently where the journalist said, do you understand what I do as a journalist? And one of them said, oh yeah, you're the guy outside the tube station handing out the free metro. You know what I mean? No idea what journalism was, right? Let's not underestimate that. Also, journalism is becoming kind of like a rare profession. We used to bump into our local journalists just like we'd bump into our local baker or our local postman, right? Right now, they are like a rarefied, weird creature that lives in a big city. People don't, when there's an issue of trust, very often it's because there's just not been enough contact. I think that we journalists, and I'll say we because of I've only recently put aside my journalism work to do the work I do at the moment. We also need to really, as you said, be honest about our failings, but also transmit. And I think there really is, even though journalists are extremely, supremely busy, to actually help and transmit some of the talents and some of the intrinsic and natural curiosity and fact-checking skills that they have themselves. So we're talking about media literacy, we're talking about funds for media literacy, we've not yet talked about, but it is implicit that we're going to have to retrain teachers. Teachers are very open to external talent coming in. Let's help them, let's help them. Let's help the teachers understand how to do this stuff. And I think journalists are extremely well placed to do that and have got a real civic responsibility to do that.
Thank you, Juliana. Maybe we should come back to the questions from the audience. And as I said, we had a question from Ali Reza directed to Anya about children again. Please explain a bit how it is possible for kids when using Facebook to recognize fake news from reality. So you mentioned the digital literacy library. Maybe you should be a bit more explicit about how it works, Anya.
Okay, so is the question referring to when they see fake news on the newsfeed? So first of all, I hope that only children above 13 years old are on the platform. Otherwise, that's not, of course, what we normally permit. But in general, you know, what we do around facts that were fact-checked and were proven false, we don't take that information down. However, we basically downgrade it in the ranking. So first and foremost, the probability that you might see something that was fact-checked and was false is less than seeing an accurate source of information on a given topic. If you, however, still persist, so if the young person still persists in searching for the particular source of information, even though it was fact-checked to be false, it's possible to find it. There will be a label appearing on top of the article saying this article was fact-checked and is incorrect. And there will be links appearing as well, directing to the fact-checked information, to the explanation as well. The studies show that this limits the spread of such an information by 80%, which already is quite significant, because, you know, the main problem, especially when it comes to situations such as COVID and other crises, is the virality of certain false news that happen on the platform. The fact, of course, is important that if it was seen by 20 people, 200 or 2 million. So with that in mind, we basically focus on containing the virality here. And I personally, on my personal Facebook, did encounter a couple of, I would almost call it clickbait, even though I consider myself fairly literate, media literate person. And I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I was like, oh, wait, I see this has the label. And it immediately puts you off. And it immediately is this reaction like, I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to waste my time. And that's what we hope young people will have as a reaction. And we hope that the tools we put from our side kind of help navigate the platform, our platform. And of course, there are similar solutions in neighboring platforms, really.
Thank you. We have another question from Kaltrina regarding the specific case of elections, you know, inaccurate or false information regarding election. Is there some specific procedures or attention from Facebook regarding this specific topic?
Yeah, so the whole issue of what we call election interference, so basically any kind of false information around how to vote, how to register, who is the winner, whether it's you know, safe to vote or not, where is the polling station in case it's an incorrect address, we consider all under the umbrella of election interference, of preventing people to exercise their democratic right to vote. We basically take this quite seriously and you know, and make sure that this kind of information is taken away. We also, in situations where you know, certain elections were resulting in unknown kind of outcome, like unclear who won, unclear what actually happens until the votes are counted, we kind of put a label. We put a label on someone announcing himself as a victor, that actually this is not yet confirmed by anyone, or the confirmation is different. And I think I see this question, and it's a referrer to US elections. We in fact you know, try to roll it in for all elections. We now basically, since we roll out many of our new policies and tools, work on 200 elections, including, for example, quite recently in Myanmar, where we also had a lot of lessons. So we had a lot of lessons from the US elections in 2016, but we also had many lessons from the elections in Myanmar. And in between, there was lots of elections in Europe and outside of Europe, where we always try to basically be completely politically neutral, but just be able to make sure that people have the right information when it comes where to go to vote, basically.
Thank you, Anya. Audrius, we have a lot of questions related to the content, the moderation or the regulation of the content of social media. We know that the EU Commission, following the work of the high-level expert group on disinformation, promoted the model of code of practice shared with the platforms. We had several assessments of that code of practice. It seems it's not fully satisfactory. Are you thinking right now about next steps or other steps regarding the regulation of the content on social media?
Yeah, so it's not a secret that the Commission, not that it's thinking, it's putting on paper everything as we speak, and those new proposals will be announced by the Commission very soon, beginning December. And indeed, content moderation will be very much in focus. Perhaps it's a bit early to announce, details of those rules, not to spoil, the beginning of December press release of a Commission. So perhaps I will just mention briefly the direction. And the direction is likely to be indeed that of primarily more transparency about content moderation, how it happens and what parameters take into account. But then perhaps on top of the transparency, it's likely to be part of this regulatory initiative is likely to be closer supervision of content moderation, and thirdly, probably also a bit more control to the user. So once the user knows how content is moderated, so that there is some control the user himself or herself could exercise over content moderation. So these are broadly the directions of the action on our side.
Yes, Juliana?
Yeah, I'd love to say something about that. So I think that, fact-checking and content moderation are, of course, supremely important. And once people know that fact-checking sites are out there, like Snopes, like PolitiFact, like Mimikama in Austria, these things can be extremely valuable. But please let us not overestimate the panacea of content moderation and fact-checking. I understand the Commission needs to pick the low-hanging fruit that exists, but I hope that is not going to be to the exclusion of reaching for the higher goals and the more sustainable goals. Let's not forget, we're not going to delete our way out of this problem. Mark Zuckerberg, speaking at the Senate hearing last night, once again mentioned, I don't know how many millions of pages taken down, and yet we can see that pandemic believers in QAnon, believing in Bill Gates's microchipping, are alive and well. This is, let's not forget also, we talk so much about Facebook, we talk so much about Twitter. This is not where all of the disinformation is circulating. The disinformation is circulating according to the children that tell us. It's circulating in the unmoderated universe, in the encrypted universe, in the private chat rooms where content moderators cannot reach, where when you talk about reaching into WhatsApp groups, there are some very valiant efforts, but they really are like throwing bottles into the sea with a message and hoping that it arrives somewhere. There is no way of measuring it. Let's not put all of our apples into that one basket. I would also say,
Can I
if fact checking is not going to, yes,
sorry,
yeah,
Juliana.
Yeah, sure. I just think that this is, I'll just say one thing. We saw this being used as the panacea back in 2018. You know, let's not make the same mistake again. Let's go a little bit further. We've learned a lot more. We now know about Cambridge Analytica. We know about how difficult it is to moderate. We know about so many more things. Let's actually do something about it. We also can see the effect, the detrimental effect that the silos have had on our democracy. And I don't think that there's much time to waste. And I really, really hope that the Commission's got a few other things up its sleeve as well. I'll say one other thing. I was really interested in what Anya said about the fact that you stop and think. That's a wonderful instinct, and we wish that more people had it. When you look at people around you and you get familiar with this and you watch people, the way they scroll, there is not much stopping and thinking. One very simple thing, and I'd love to have the answer to this. So Facebook during the pandemic put up a new emoticon, right? So, you know, Facebook can measure whether I'm angry about something, because if I press the angry emoticon, they know that I'm angry. Or if I press the fearful emoticon, they know that I'm fearful, right? However, I now have the option of doing the little hug emoticon because I want to send somebody my love. Why not add the thought emoticon to every one of your posts, and therefore implicitly encourage every one of your millions and billions of users to do exactly what you just said, Anya, stop and think.
Yeah, sorry, I have disappeared the video, but I will be back in a second. Yeah, I can do my if you stay there.
We stay there.
Yeah. Don't go away, please.
Don't worry.
And I'm back. I think. Carry on, because it seems that it's taking longer than.
I think it's coming now. No, not yet.
So anyway,
but you can.
Yeah, I can comment. Yeah, here
Excellent.
I'm back.
Now
okay.
We can see you.
Yeah, so I actually pick there are a lot of reflection points. I will start from the very last that you say. Stop and think is a revolutionary act in itself that we should do regardless of the digital environment, and in our is a life skill. And but indeed the idea of the emoticon it could be a good one. Is so just and we are as Iavi. We are, as Iavi, we are developing what we call the Iavi Food is a menu, and we are using some of noise to have people reflecting about the fact that the information and news, disinformation, bad or good, is food that we ingest and is healthy or not for our health. I would like also to mention about this panacea. I absolutely agree. Or alibi is media literacy has been a bit overshadowed by the importance that rightly is disinformation has got, and this interference on the elections was on the mainstream but it's not just that. Is fact-checking as a very clear limit in the impact and how efficient they could be. I think this is recognized, although it can play a role, is not per se the solution. And indeed, the Commission should acknowledge the research and also available in this respect that much more, in addition to having people more skilled, because there is a limit to that too. So this media literacy is indeed cannot neither be a panacea for all evils. And indeed fact-checking and disinformation is important. Indeed, I think that is the need for rules has been mentioned. Juliana was mentioning about the fact that maybe Facebook and this kind of corporation, they are too big, even if in good faith they want to fix some of the problems that they have generated. Anya was saying we can be part of the solution. We have to remember that is it possible that as you were producing some of the problems, you will also be part of the solution? I personally think so, and in fact, we can only do it with you, because you are only, you are reaching 2 billion people, and this is one of the points that media literacy pillars. We have to acknowledge pragmatically the role of media, and then to act. We cannot just be utopian, but indeed the role of institutions, the European Commission we are talking about, is we mentioned is that there is another piece of regulation that is in this famous digital tax. Is it possible? Is not? And again there are veto here and there. Transnational, global, is not very easy to get to an agreement. But yeah, it is much broader. And if we want to see something happening, we have to act on different fronts. And I think that it could be, we have no alternatives, because the alternative is that people like, I am less diplomatic than you, but people like Trump or Erdogan or Orban or others, they will get better organized next time, not less. And then we won't have just somebody that is saying that he has won when he has not, but democracy could be in more real danger. There is a number of investment you have mentioned about independence of research center, civil society organization. Google is investing a lot in news producer, journalist. I think they think about journalists. I think that they look that you have good intentions. This is the main, I think, when you mention about public interest.
Yeah.
Primordially important. Then you can be wrong or right, but you try your best, and you are authoritative enough, especially certain media, public service media or others. Of course, we need journalists. We have to trust somebody, and indeed, something that was mentioned before, we can only trust. To trust somebody, you have to be honest. This applies not only to journalism and media, social media. There is a lot of rhetoric about we want your trust as a consumer. If you want my trust, then behave accordingly, and you will get it automatically. These are my comments.
Thank you, Paolo. We still have 2 minutes if we want to respect the schedule. So I think we should go for the final comments. And sorry for we still have 2 or 3 questions to treat, but we won't have time. Of course, it's impossible to do it in the 2 coming minutes. So of course, it's impossible to summarize such a wide-ranging debate. I'm just going to ask our 3 speakers to briefly define maybe what's for them the main challenge to be taken up regarding, of course, media literacy in their specific field. So I'll give you 1 minute maximum to reply to this question, and we'll start with Juliana, Audris, and Anya to close, and maybe some comments from Paolo to close the webinar as well. Juliana, please.
Great, thank you. And it is really hard to summarize all of this, but I would say, and I would like to take this opportunity to try and answer the question that Katerina put in the feed just now, because this is something that I'd really like to say. So what can we do when we're talking about media literacy? Let's not forget the end users of media literacy, right? Let's really keep in mind the children and the teachers. And yes, I really hope that the work that we do with the children and the teachers is fun and is entertaining and makes them laugh, and is relevant to them and goes down to their level, down, I say down, quote. Media literacy doesn't always have to be about refugee policy or religious tolerance or anything like that. No, in fact, when we talk about media literacy, we've got to make it playful. We've got to make it non-political. We've got to make it into something that any teacher, who, by the way, has to keep in mind the various priorities of the parents at home that they have to deal with, that any teacher in any classroom can employ, that is relevant to the age group, that is relevant to the concerns of the children, that allows these children to flex their critical muscle in a way that is completely, non-threatening, so that one day when they do come across something that is really important, something that is politically important, that is where an informed decision is going to be necessary, that they have that muscle already trained and they can deploy it where is necessary. And let's also please not forget teachers under unbelievable pressure. If we're going to be training them, let's train them in a way that is actually sustainable for them. But let's train them so that every teacher, regardless of their subject area, regardless of whether they're teaching maths or biology, primary school, physics, politics, ethics, that they can all talk about this fundamental core literacy that children need to have, which is to check the information, because they're getting the information very much by themselves. Let's help them do it, all of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliana. Audrius, the main challenge for you.
So first of all, let me say that I am optimistic about the media content space and information space for the coming years. True, there were some challenges, and some of those challenges continue, but we also see lots of good initiatives going on, and there will be new proposals from the Commission. But even more importantly, there are organizations like Julian's who are working on the ground and generating change on the ground. So all of that is promising. I think the next years will be good for media literacy. Perhaps to mention, since you're asking about challenges, one challenge that I would mention for media literacy from European policymaking perspective. So, okay, we have some rules, we have some money, but how do we know that that the situation has improved? Because it's a bit intangible, this field of media literacy. So the effort we put in now probably will produce some effect in some years, but it's difficult to know when and how.
Thank you. Anya?
From our company perspective, I think the challenge that we every day have is that, and Juliana alluded to that, is that we find and take down millions of fake accounts of coordinated networks trying to interfere into democratic processes. We're doing this every day and we'll continue doing so, I'm sure, for many years to come. But this is never ending, right? At the moment we take down one network, another network can come in and spread, continue spreading some kind of disinformation, which is done really on purpose of disinforming the community. Media literacy is really the solution that can address it once and for all. Because if we all start having these reflexes of, thinking like, who wrote something? Whether I trust this source? Is this meant as a parody? Is this meant as a satire? Or is it meant to kind of, copy the look and appearances of some serious publisher, yet it's not the publisher? Maybe I should double check and make sure before I actually share it further. That would really limit the spread of those networks. Companies such as Facebook, but many others, will continue investing and trying to find as many of those networks as possible. When Mark Zuckerberg reports about the millions of accounts taken down, it's a success. But when they ask us how many more is left there, we don't know. Obviously, if we knew, we would take them down. So this is a continuous struggle where media literacy is this really true armor for our users to basically make sure that they get what they're really looking for, rather than be a subject of some disinformation campaigns.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you all for your participation in the debate. And before giving the floor to Paolo for the final words and wishing you a nice evening, I found a way to summarize our debate. Well, Juliana find it indeed. Stop and think. The floor is yours, Paolo.
Thank you. Yeah, I have adopted some technique to stop and think. For instance, I have taken away my portable from my bedroom, and I have put the old traditional clock, the one that is tick, 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 tick. Stopping is not easy, especially because a certain technology is designed for not stopping us. Is the video that starts immediately, is one after the other, or on Netflix and so forth. So is becoming increasingly difficult for a person to be aware of what is happening and is online behavior, and therefore is really challenging. Having said that, as somebody said, this attention is the most powerful feature that human beings possess. Are we able to listen to others? Are we able to pay attention about what is going on? This is makes the quality of your life is much better, regardless or not whether you are living in a digital environment or walking in the park. I would like to thank you all. I think, from a strategic point of view, I would like to see EAVI as promoting these debates with common objective that is in the interest of people, because we do need all of us in our respective capacities and organization to be more comfortable, happier, and less not this kind of debates. They often focus on the negative aspects. There are a lot of good things about technologies. Indeed, I think regulation is a key important aspect, and the role and responsibilities of each has to go in enabling and empower people, not just rhetorically. It means for the European Commission, for instance, policy and money is civil society. Indeed, they must remain independent. They struggle with fundraising. We need not to be hero in this domain. No, it's just to work for the common good. Let me thank not only each of you for having accepted and for having rendered this debate rich. I also thank all the participants here on Zoom and on Facebook. I think we count at least 20 different countries that are participating. EAVI conversation doesn't finish here. We have a special guest next Wednesday at 4. So keep tuned. We have a surprise for you. And thank again to the EAVI people, because there are quite a few that you haven't seen, but they not only ensure that this is working, but they are all young. I think this is something we should know when we are saying about respecting children. You mentioned a lot, Julian, about it. Young people, let's respect young people. Is a decision these days, and democracy is also corrupt by the fact that our menu is too short. And in the USA, we have to choose in between two people, and none of them is young enough, isn't it? Okay, experience and age and whatever. Obviously, personally, I think that one is enormously better than the other one. But democracy should also is having people and re-engage and young people to get more affectionate to democracy. So thank you.